So, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to host our evening lecture today, Clemens Cavallin, who's a good friend and is well acquainted with Croatia. He comes from Sweden. Of particular interest is his work on the life of the great Catholic writer Michael O'Brien, who's very well known in Croatia. I would say his book, The Island of the World, is a masterpiece. And Clemens has written a biography of Michael, which I would recommend to all of you. And most recently, his latest book is Art and Sacrificial Love. So Clemens, thank you for accepting this invitation. It's been 2 months since we congregated here. Mr. Robin Harris gave a talk last time on the COVID pandemic. So we're looking forward to this talk. It's an important subject, religious freedom. We are concerned about the situation in Europe. You see from inside what the ideology being imposed from Brussels can cause, and the difficulties involving academic freedom, free speech, etc. So once again, we're honored to have you, and after your talk, we'll have time for some discussion. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stepo, and it's great being here and addressing you, and also you on the internet later. And this was prepared with rather short notice, but I hope that I will be able to provide some intellectual challenges to you, so we will have a good discussion, because I don't think it's a good idea just to tell you how exotically bad it is in Sweden or Norway, but we need some principal questions to discuss when it comes to religious freedom and secularity. So the title of this talk is The Role of the Principle of Religious Freedom in a Radically Secular Europe. And Croatia is not radically secular, I wouldn't say. We will see that later. But Sweden and Norway, for example, are much better, examples of what such, a secularity that has gone very far can be. And I think personally that the development in France is also very significant. But I will focus on Scandinavia mainly. And one of the main thoughts here is that when Christians argue with the help of the idea of religious freedom, when it comes to certain grievances, governmental laws and so on, one is accepting a specific freedom and understanding of religion, of freedom, and also of a secular society. And one of my main points will be here that traditional Catholicism has another idea of what religion is. And that creates interesting tensions with the modern understanding and notion of religion. So my talk will be divided into a more conceptual first stage, where we will look upon some concepts, will be the little bit more boring part of my talk, but then we will go to the more concrete examples, so to speak. So it's a two-part talk in that sense. And many of the dynamics and processes that I will try to highlight are not very clearly visible when you have a majority Christendom, but when the Christian faith is in majority in a country like in Croatia. But when you say the really believing Christians become a minority, and a rather small minority, then what is built into religious freedom will be much more visible. And for example, I would just point to, for example, the neo-pagan imagination that is taking over the imaginative culture, for example. So one of the ideas with this talk is if we would kind of think about the more traditional understanding of religion, what would that mean for a discussion of religious freedom in a radically secular society? This is the first concept part. So, religious freedom is never unrestricted. It's not a freedom like, I have this religion, I can do anything this religion says. There is never such a religious freedom. Religious freedom is always restricted. So in a sense, the freedom, by saying, I give you freedom, you also give that person, religion, organization, certain limits. That within this sphere, I give you freedom. Outside of this sphere there is no freedom. So it's always limits, there are always borders. And I try to make a little drawing here that shows this hopefully in a clear way. So you can see that religious freedom will give you the freedom to be public with your religion within a certain sphere, so to speak. But other parts of your religion will have to remain private. And some are strictly forbidden. You're not even allowed, more or less, to think certain principles, so to speak. So when thinking about religious freedom, we have to be attentive to where are these borders drawn. They are drawn at different places in different countries. There is no such thing as a universal secularity of the state. The secular state is different in India, United States, Sweden, and Croatia. That's an important point. So I have one more here. Let's see. So if we have established that religious freedom draws these boundaries between what is private, what is public, and what is kind of outlawed, we also have to look a little bit more at what a secular society is, because the topic of this talk is religious freedom in a radically secularized society. What does that mean? It could be a more normative claim, which is where you could see more, perhaps most clearly in France, where you have a secularist ideology that claims religion should really stay out of this sphere, this sphere, this sphere, this sphere. So it's very restricted where religion actually has its freedom to appear in the public. But then you have secularization, which is not a normative stance of the state towards religious organizations or individuals. It is the actual decrease of religion. So it's more descriptive. It's a description of a society like Sweden, that religion on the individual level decreases, importance in civil society, and for the state. So the thing here is you can have secularization on individual level, but still have a very strong presence of religion at the state level. And that has actually been the case in the Scandinavian countries. We have had state churches until for just, in Sweden for just 20 years ago, and in Norway just a few years ago, actually. So in Norway, it's been a process the last 10 years to get to leave the state church behind. But still, the Lutheran former state churches in the Scandinavian countries are controlled by the political parties. They're controlled by specific laws. So interestingly enough, when it comes to, for example, Sweden, there's a very low score for individual religiosity, but religion is still intertwined with the interests of the political parties and the state. So there is also this relationship between the idea of religious freedom and secularity. Because secularity, in this sense, is exactly where religion is not allowed. It's the public sphere where you're not supposed to argue with because God wants it or something like that. You cannot bring up Bible quotes or anything like that. So there is a relationship between secularity and this restricting function of religious freedom. And let's look at the next slide here, because this is also an important conceptual, you say, division and not division at many times. What is religion and what is culture? And sometimes it's both religion and culture. Is not all religion a form of culture? And also here you have to be very attentive to how, you say, laws are written, reports, different kind of documents that will govern schools or any other kind of say, activities and institutions, because sometimes something that would be counted as religion will in another context be counted as culture. And if you have restrictions on religion appearing in the public, it will appear as culture, then there is no problem. We will come to an example of that when it comes to church bells. To ring a church bell, is that a religious act or a cultural act, for example? That's an important, say, conceptual definition. And in one sense, religious freedom makes all religions into culture. It cuts away, say, as a religious freedom combined with the secularity of the state, says that no religion should be foundational for this state, for this people. Which means that all religions are different variants of culture on the same horizontal level, so to speak. Okay, let's see what. Now we come to the next distinction, which perhaps is the most important, most interesting for me, and that is the modern notion of religion as, we could say, different ways to relate to the supernatural. That would be a kind of essence that you will find in many, many modern definitions of religion. But this is not actually, you say, the classical Catholic definition of religion. What you would find in, for example, Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica. I don't know if you read this specific passage about religion in Summa Theologica. I can see that you have done that. The interesting there is that religion is counted as a virtue. And it's a virtue under the larger heading of the virtue of justice. And the virtue of justice, kind of put in a very essential way, is to give somebody what is due to him or her. So the understanding of religion here is that you give to God what is due to him. That is religion. And as it is a virtue, you can reach higher and higher level of perfection in that virtue. You can give God more and more what is due to him, or less and less and less. So you can have a sliding scale of more or less perfect religion. But in this definition, if you don't give God what is due to him, it is not religion, even if it involves the supernatural. But the modern notion of religion, every possible way of relating to the supernatural is called religion. And that means that religion kind of shades into magic. Religion shades into the spiritual and so on. And it means in a religious freedom context that you give freedom to say, Catholicism, Lutheranism, Baptism, Methodism, Russian Orthodoxy, Hinduism, Buddhism, and so on and so on. But also to Satanism, for example, witchcraft, and all that kind of say, ways of relating to the supernatural, which would be, in a more traditional understanding, would not really be counted. Satanism would not be counted as religion. It would be the kind of the antithesis of religion. But the modern concept of religion puts all these different ways of relating to the supernatural on the same level. One of my colleagues in Norway has just published a book based on this understanding of religion in German. So he's listed all the influencers of religion of the 20th century. So you will find John Paul II there, but you will also find Aleister Crowley, for example. So all these different persons will be put on the same level. There are different ways of relating to the supernatural. You can use tarot card, or you can go to mass, and so on. It will all be different ways, different forms of religion. So in a way, when you accept religious freedom, and when you as a Catholic in Croatia will argue with my rights to religious freedom have been infringed, you also say, I stand for the rights of Satanism in this country, that they will also have the same rights as me. Because if you would deny that, you will also deny religious freedom. There would not be religious. It would be religious freedom just for me, but not for everyone else. And that is illogical. However, people are often illogical. That's the case. So, but I think this is a very, very interesting, say, tension or contradiction, or we will see, because this will play out differently in a situation where, say, for example, in Croatia, where Catholic Christianity is in majority. That will not show so clearly. But in a situation where all forms of Christianity will just be like 10% of the population, this will be much more clear, so to say. Okay. Let's see. So now to the concrete. What we can see for example, in Norway, where I'm living right now, is that there is a very quick de-Christianization of society. And for me, I was living in Norway in the period between 2003 and 2007, and then I went back to Sweden, and now I'm back in Norway again. So I've been away for 13 years. I came back 2020. And I must say that the changes have been really dramatic. When I left, Norway was still, you could say, a more Christian country than Sweden. It was a marked contrast. But since then, it's really fallen off a cliff, I would say. And when I teach Christianity, we have just a short little installment about Christianity. There will always be a student who raises her hand and asks, what kind of Christianity are we? So they have no idea I could say anything. So they wouldn't know. And that's actually, now I'm speaking as a teacher. It's very difficult to teach because most students have no experience of religion. They have not really seen much of religion. They have not experienced it from the inside. So it's difficult to teach like Asian religions, which is my specialty, to students who lack experience of, say, lived Christianity, for example. So we have seen dramatic drops in Christian faith, and at the same time, this leads to loss of religion. It's not like everyone who stops being Christian become Buddhists or something like that. They stop being religious, most of them. And here we could see some figures. And here you can see there's a dramatic drop here. Let's see what, I don't remember the years here, but you can see that Norway's is a 28% decrease in this investigation. Sweden will have a 22%. And these are people who say they are Christians. But you will see that this is not the whole story. So what we can see here is that in certain countries there's a dramatic drop of Christian self-identification. So this is still a kind of a weak thing to measure. You can say, I'm a Christian, but it doesn't really have to mean so much besides a kind of cultural identity or something. But then we combine this with the figures for people telling different polls that religion is very important in my life or it is not very important. So here you can see in this investigation done by Pew, in Norway 19% would say religion is very important. In Sweden only 10%. And you can see similar numbers in France, Germany, UK. You get higher, a little bit higher in Southern Europe, and I think we can see Croatia here with it's somewhat higher. So Croatia is a kind of a border country in this sense. But you could see it's here the religious, strong religious identity beliefs are. So in Pakistan, 94% thinks religion is very important. In Sweden, only 10%. So that goes for quite another kind of dynamics. What I wanted to show here is when in these majority Christian countries, say, identification as Christian or strong belief, Christian belief decreases, also the importance of religion decreases. That I think is the main part here. Then you can combine this with demographics, and you could combine it with immigration and emigration streams and so on. And then we can paint a picture of the future of religion. So the future of Christianity is here. Here's the future of Christianity. So you will have African missionaries coming here, trying to convert Europeans. That is most probably that would be the case. But still, you could see here that then Sweden compared with Croatia is quite different. So in Sweden, 82% will say religion is not important in my life. That will only be 28% in Croatia. And important in daily life in this investigation, 70% will be 70% in Croatia. So you see that in a discussion of religious freedom in a radically secular Europe, Croatia would not be a good example how the future would look like. But Sweden and Norway would be better, I would say, test cases to see how this development would be. And I will show you some more statistics of Norway. So in poll 2020, 30% said they believed in God, which is a 23% drop since the middle 1980s. That is quite dramatic, I would say. And only 21% would be, according to another poll, personally Christian. And among young Norwegians, the belief in God is only 19%, around that. And what does believe in God means? So that is, you can cut that down to mean lesser numbers also by looking to how often they go to church, if they pray daily, and so on. So 48% in Norway then answered that they did not believe in God. Less than 20% pray daily. And 10% identified with the humanistic ethics organization. That's the strong atheist, secularist organization in Norway, which often kind of goes into debates and controversies regarding the role of religion in the public sphere, public space. And here we have, at the same time, and now we're coming to this, at the same time that this is happening, de-Christianization, lower levels of religious belief, identity, and so on, increased number of Muslims, and therefore also increased presence for Islam in both Sweden and Norway. But Sweden is more, extreme in that sense. We will see a projection of the Pew regarding that. And it's difficult to know exactly how many percentage of, for example, the people in Norway are Muslims, and in Sweden, so it all will be approximations. So some will be registered in organizations, others will not be. So 3-4% registered, maybe the total will be like 6%. So you have this combination. Christianity is reduced to a vague cultural heritage. The majority worldview is non-religious, and there is an increasing percentage of Muslims. And in this projection, there are 3 levels of this projection. The one with 0, let's see, one is 0. This is the medium migration scenario for 2020, and this is the high migration scenario. 50, yes, 2050. It's not so far away. So you could see the medium migration scenario. Sweden is as 20% Muslims, and in the high migration scenario, it will be like 30%. That is a quite dramatic change in a country like Sweden, both 20% or 30%. If you combine that with a really Christianity falling off a cliff and lack of religion among most ethnic Swedes, and then you have this increase of Islam at the same time. And this creates a specific dynamics for controversies when it comes to religious freedom, as we will see. As you can see here, Croatia 1.6, 2.0, 2.1. So Croatia is not affected by this development and has not been affected so much either by the decline of Christian faith and identity. So this is a controversy which is playing out now in Norway in media, especially the Christian media. And that is about, should Muslim mosques be allowed to have calls to prayer or not? And the interesting here for a religious studies scholar is to see what kind of arguments are put forward for or against this. So we can see the humanist, the lobby organization for atheists in Norway would say equal treatment. If you remember the modern notion of religion, puts all kind of religious beliefs and organizations on the same level. They will give equal amount of freedom to all these ways of relating to the supernatural. And that means if you don't want Muslims called to prayers, you must cancel all church bells as well. You cannot ring in a church bell to call to prayer in a church and then deny Muslims the same thing. So the logical thing here for strict religious freedom is to take away this. And the somewhat provocatively, he said, the man, the representative for the human historian said they could use SMS instead to call people to church. Send out SMS. New technology will make this.
WhatsApp.
Yeah, for example, why not? Why not? So, but in the Church of Norway, in this discussion, a representative of the Church of Norway, that is the former state church, the Lutheran Church, wants to allow both Muslim calls to prayer and church bells. And that is another way of treating all religions the same. Okay, if we are going to retain our right to ring in church bells, we will let Muslims call to prayer as well. And the result is, of course, that all kinds of religious groups then will be allowed to call to prayer. So in a radically multi-religious society, there will be, a cacophony of different sounds that will call to different kind of religious meetings, like in a marketplace where everyone is calling out, come and buy figs, 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 apples, apples, apples. So that's another vision of, religious freedom. So in one drawing of the line, calling to prayer will be within what is allowed in the public space, so to speak. In other words, no religion will have to do that. It's that belongs to the private sphere. The third one is the Nationalist Party, and they would like to allow church bells as they are neutral and part of Norwegian tradition. And that will be an argument from cultural heritage, not from that our God is the only God, and therefore we must ring in the church bell because that is a virtuous thing to do, because we are obliged to give God honor in this way. No? So also here it's the Jews, it's the same kind of understanding of religion, but here comes the drawing of line between religion and culture. So in a way, church bells are not really religion. They are kind of instances of cultural acts, which are important for us as, in this case, Norwegians. So then you escape from this drawing of the line between religious freedom and what is not allowed as part of religious freedom, and then you argue with this religion-culture divide instead. And of course, you can have many more ways of arguing here and drawing these lines at different places. But I think what is interesting here is, of course, that a decreasing majority position, a weakening of the majority position for Christians will inevitably lead to either a marketplace of religion, so to speak, or that all religions will be put under very severe restrictions. So in Norway is also a discussion right now about another suggestion, which is similar to that in France, that every funding from abroad must be, you must show kind of a receipt where it came from, and then the government will look into, is this a country which promotes the values that we are comfortable with? Do they have the death sentence? Do they, how do they handle religious freedom? So that could be a way of then cutting funding for, in this case, mosques, for example. So these religious freedom questions are very much alive, I would say. If you then combine this with also, now you cannot see this very clearly, this is a scene from the film Avatar. You may have seen it, which is a kind of a gospel of pantheism, ecological consciousness, transfer of souls, and so on. It's a lot of religion going on. Here they're sitting in a kind of prayer connected to this spirit of nature, so to speak. But you can also, you don't see very clearly this. This is a movie that's just coming out, kind of Spider-Man with a long tongue and very sharp teeth. And it's the idea is that he resides within the body of a human being. It's a classical case of possession, so to speak. And here you have the Matrix. Here you have angels, demons of the author of the Da Vinci Code. Here you have another avatar. I just picked some on random, more or less, from the entertainment culture that is surrounding us and which we are constantly consuming. And there is precious little of, say, Christian ideas, beliefs, culture in this. There is a specific kind of neo-pagan spirituality that you will find in these kinds of entertainment, which is also a sign, but also a factor driving a secularization of mind and imagination, you could say. Here is another interesting development relating to religious freedom, because when you give religious freedom to every way of relating to the supernatural, so for example, witchcraft will then be an accepted form of religion in the countries in Norway. This is an organization called the Nordic Pagans, and they have been approved as a religious community, which means that they then can marry and perform baptisms and so on. There was a kind of a case that brought a little bit of attention a couple of weeks ago when there was such a witchcraft wedding performed in a church ruin, for example. So there was a little bit of a discussion around that. And this is just going to increase. Nordens paganister will be the pagans of the north. So what does religious freedom mean when Christianity has faded? Perhaps there will be like 10% of the population that will be identifying in a strong way with Christianity. Most people are non-believers, and it takes a couple of generations, then even the memories of the Christian faith of the parents or in the surrounding culture is gone. There will be a large Muslim minority which is increasing, which takes its religiosity seriously in a way which most Scandinavians don't. But there is also esoteric and occult beliefs and practices that spread and are accepted. It's not that there are, hundreds, thousands of witches everywhere, but the ideas and mentality become more and more accepted, and in entertainment culture, you can see that it's a dominant form of thinking of the world in that sphere, for example. And I think we will see much, much more of that. But also increasing of radical gender ideology becomes a foundational principle of public life. It's woven into laws and regulations, both on the state level and or say civil society when it comes to organizations. This means that perhaps that this sphere for the public appearance of religion will shrink, and much more will be pushed into the private or become strictly forbidden outside the, say, what is beyond our values, because that is often the way it's expressed. We have in this country we have a certain set of values, and what lies outside of that we don't accept. But values can be changed, of course, and they are being changed all the time. So I think my main message here is with the modern understanding of religious freedom comes certain radical changes in society when Christianity is demoted from its majority position to a minority position, which is difficult to understand or even fathom when you are in a majority situation. But when you are actually in a minority situation, these dynamics become really palpable. And I think a creative way to think about this is to think of other ways of actually defining what religion is. Because when you accept kind of the language of religious freedom, you're also accepting a certain understanding of religion. And I could unpack that much more here. We could have a separate lecture about that, because it comes down to the limits of rationality, comes down to, is there such a thing as natural religion, and so on. But I think for, in this case, Catholics, it could be a good exercise to at least think with the traditional definition and understanding of religion, to create a kind of alternative space to look at religious liberty from the side, so to speak, and then decide what to do. So thank you very much for listening to this short, I hope it was short, talk, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.